Hello, my name is Andrea Topper. I am the Nutrient Management Outreach Specialist with the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Today, we're going to talk about conservation compliance requirements within nutrient management plans. So, you have a nutrient management plan. What does that necessarily mean? It means that you're agreeing to meet certain conservation standards. Within that nutrient management plan, every field needs to meet the tolerable soil loss. Additionally, each field needs to meet the average phosphorus index of 6 or below, as well as following and implementing UW fertility recommendations. And last but not least is our requirement for following surface and groundwater protection setbacks and prohibitions in restricted areas, whether that be in regards to manure applications and/or fertilizer applications. Let's quickly touch on some of the calculations that are found within SNAP Plus. These calculations are the calculations that are running in the background that help us determine conservation compliance. The first one we're going to look at is Russell 2. Russell 2 is the soil loss equation that is used by NRCS. As you can see in this equation, there's a couple different factors that go into estimating soil loss on each of our fields. The one that we have the most control over as planners is this C factor, the crop and tillage or management piece of the Russell 2 equation. So what are some of those things that can go into that C factor? That could be frequency of tillage. It could be looking at soil surface disturbance. It could be the amount of ground cover we have or canopy cover. What type of crop are we planting? How much biomass are we removing? All of those things are factors that go into the C factor of the Russell 2 equation. So if we had an excess amount of soil loss on a field, these would be some of the things that we could look at a little bit closer to see what can we change to maybe reduce some of our soil loss issues. As I mentioned in the beginning, each field is required to meet tolerable soil loss. Tolerable soil loss can range from 1 to 5 tons per acre per year. The amount of soil loss is going to depend on the dominant critical soil type that is found within each field. A dominant critical soil type must take up at least 10% of that field. In this example, the dominant critical soil is a Kiwani, and this tolerable amount of soil loss for this soil type is 3 tons. With the current practices that we are implementing, our average soil loss is sitting at 4.1 tons. You can see that red box there. That's telling us that that is a non-compliant rotation, meaning that we as a planner need to kind of take a step back and look at our rotation and identify if there's anywhere that we could change some practices. Now, what could we do? What are some of those practices that we could look at and change and implement within this plan to help us better meet T? First and foremost, we could alter our cropping rotations. Within a cropping rotation, you could look at increasing years of perennial crops, increasing use of cover crops, reducing years in which you're removing a lot of biomass. So those years that you have a lot of silage happening, you're removing a ton of biomass and not leaving a lot for ground cover in that fall time period. We could also look at changing our tillage practices. Any opportunity to reduce tillage or remove a pass out of the system is going to help us meet soil loss. Additionally, using conservation practices, whether that be strip cropping or contour farming, or implementing some vegetative strips and buffers. Those are all ways that we can help reduce our soil loss from field to field. The next equation we're going to talk about is the phosphorus index. The phosphorus index helps us estimate the amount of phosphorus that can be delivered to surface water through erosion and runoff. I like to look at a visual here. So again, it's a planning tool that we use to help us estimate the amount of runoff that's going to leave a field and potentially reach a surface water body. It helps us kind of estimate how much potential phosphorus is leaving our field and reaching that surface water body. Field by field, our average P index has to be at or below 6. In this example, our average P index is at a 4. Once that average P index is 6 or above, we are no longer allowed to apply manure to that field. That field is a high risk for movement of phosphorus off of that field and reaching the surface water body, and we do not want to be contaminating our surface waters with phosphorus. So when we see an average P index of 6 or above, we are no longer able to apply manure to those fields. Another strategy that we have is the P2O5 balance strategy. In our examples here, you can see that we have 2 different red boxes. This is where we're going to look at for our soil, or excuse me, our P2O5 balance. So P2O5 removal shows the expected crop removal across the rotation. In this example, we have a 4-year rotation. So across this 4-year rotation, we're going to be removing 160 pounds of phosphorus. The P2O5 balance represents the difference between the total amount of nutrients applied and the crop removal of those nutrients over that 4-year rotation. In this example here, we have a negative balance of 141. A negative balance tells us that we are likely going to be drawing down soil test P concentrations over the course of this rotation. If our balance was a positive number, we would likely be increasing our soil test P values over the rotation. Additionally, depending on our soil test P values for the field, you're going to see a different message. So in this example here, our soil test P value is 50 or less, so we do not have a specific P2O5 balance target. In the right-hand example, though, our soil test P is greater than 100 parts per million, so our P2O5 balance needs to be negative 40 or less. So in this example, we have negative 140, meaning that we're compliant with this aspect because we're less than negative 40. What are some things that we can do to achieve a good phosphorus index or P2O5 balance? Any of the things that we just discussed regarding soil loss are going to help us. So altering crop rotations, reducing tillage practices, and using conservation practices are all really great ways to help us achieve a good phosphorus index. Additionally, though, we can look at our phosphorus applications, making sure that we're minimizing our applications on the surface, and then making sure not to apply nutrients to frozen soils. We can also look at making sure we're obtaining and staying within the optimum soil test P range. We want to make sure that we're not exceeding our soil test recommendations so that we're building soil test P too high. We want to make sure that we're maintaining that optimum level. And the optimum level of soil test P is going to vary on the type of crop that you're growing. It's important to look at the document A2809, our UW Field and Vegetable Crop Guide, to help determine what our soil test optimum levels are going to be for our different crops. The last piece that I want to just touch on is the soil conditioning index. The soil conditioning index is not necessarily a piece of conservation compliance, but it's another good measure that we can look at and reference if our grower or farmer is interested in any sort of soil health aspects. Here we have circled the SCI. The SCI helps us predict the impact of a cropping system on surface soil organic matter. So over this 3-year rotation, could we be seeing potential increases to organic matter levels or decreases? The SCI could potentially help us tell that. SCIs can range from a -2 to a +2. The positive numbers are indicative that our organic matter levels might be increasing during that rotation, whereas a negative number is going to tell us that we're depleting or decreasing our soil organic matter levels throughout that rotation. Again, there's no compliance requirements related to the soil conditioning index, but it's a neat little tool that's built into SNAP and it's kind of fun to point out sometimes. How can we better improve our soil conditioning index numbers? Again, all of the things that we talked about with soil loss and our phosphorus index and P2O5 balance are ways that we can look at increasing or bettering our organic matter levels. Additionally, though, we could use organic additions. So manure applications, compost, or organic byproducts could all help us increase our organic matter levels. All right, so we touched on some of those equations that are running in the background that are helping us verify compliance. Another tool that we have is the 590 Nutrient Management Checklist. The Nutrient Management Checklist is built into the SNAP Plus program. SNAP Plus will go through and automatically check the boxes that it is able to identify compliance with or non-compliance. If it is compliant, SNAP Plus will check yes for you, and if it's not compliant, it will check the box no. There is also situations where SNAP Plus cannot identify whether it should check yes or no, so it is the job of the planner to go through and review the nutrient management checklist and fill in the blank spots. We will touch on those as we work through the checklist together here today. So our next step, let's walk through this checklist and explain why a box might be checked yes or checked no. All right, the first box, A, determine a field's nutrient levels from soil samples analyzed by a DATCAP certified lab. If every field has soil samples entered into it, it will be checked yes by SNAP Plus. The second box is making sure that we have enough soil samples. So again, one sample for every 5 acres. As long as there's enough soil tests and there's no soil test problems saying that there's too few or too old, SNAP Plus will check yes for us. The third box is specific to people who have livestock siting permits. Majority of our plans are going to be checked NA because their plan is not for a livestock siting permit requirement or approval process. Otherwise, this one will need to be filled out by the user. D, identify all fields, names, boundary, acres, and locations. If all of the fields are mapped in SNAP Maps and have boundaries, this will automatically be checked yes. A way that you can check that is on the SNAP Maps tab. If you see under field borders that every field has a multi-polygon associated with it, that will tell us that there is a field boundary and that every field has been mapped. Just briefly, I'd like to mention to you guys, I've gotten some questions about how do we know when to round if our field is 5.5 acres or 6.2 acres? Do I really need another soil sample when I need one sample for every 5 acres? Here's an example of how the rounding works within SNAP Plus. So when we're rounding, a 0 to 4 rounds down, whereas a 5 to 9 rounds up. So in example 2 here, we have a 58-acre field. 58 divided by 5 tells us that we need 11.6 samples. 11.6 samples. We have a 0.6. 0.6 rounds up to then 12 because it's within the range of 5 to 9. So we need 12 samples. In example 3, we have a 6-acre field divided by 5, 1.2. 1.2 is going to round down to 1. So 1 sample is required. If you're curious on where you can find this information, it is on a handout that we have on our nutrient management training webpage. If you go and click on the nutrient management soil sampling guidance document, that will pull up more examples for you and talk about specifics to responsive and non-responsive fields. Moving on our checklist, for E, use the field's previous year's legume credit and/or applications, making sure we're looking at our predominant soil series and realistic yield goals to determine our crop's nutrient application rates to be compliant with A2809 for N, P, and K applications. In the specific plan year, if there are no red flags for excessive nitrogen, and there's no red flags for excessive nitrogen on our legume crops, as well as no orange flags for our phosphorus over applications, you're going to see this box being checked yes. One thing I like to mention is that when our fields have high soil test p-values, SNAP Plus does allow, well, I should say the 590 standard allows that if you are planting corn, an extra 20 pounds of, or 23 pounds of phosphorus is allowed as starter for the corn, and it must be documented as a spring application and subsurface at planting. So if the spread method is not documented as subsurface, you will still get this orange flag for an over application. When we change this from unincorporated to subsurface, this message down at the bottom will tell us that our phosphorus, um, this message will go away. Next, letter F, make no winter applications of NMP fertilizer to grass pasture or except grass pastures and winter grains. That one's always going to be checked yes because SNAP Plus just doesn't allow it. G tells us to document or determine our application rates with a method that we're using for calibration. On our farm screen, on our farm tab, you're going to have this document spreader calibration methods button. It's going to remain orange until you click it and identify a specific calibration method. Once you select a calibration method, that box will turn to this gray color and it will no longer flag you with a pop-up every time you go to leave the farm screen. In this example, we've checked equipment calibration. Therefore, SNAP Plus is able to check yes, that we've documented a calibration method. Next, identify in the plan that there's adequate acreage available for manure produced and or applied. Now, this one gets to be a little tricky because it's not just looking at the current planning year, it's also looking at our prior year's data as well as our 1 year into the future, next year's data. So in order for this box in letter H to be checked yes, we need to have 90% of the manure produced applied in the prior year, current year, and future year. Once you do this, SNAP Plus will check this box yes. The other piece I want to mention as we're working through the checklist here, anytime that you see this cream or yellowish color, that's specific to a manure application rule or guideline. All right, letter I. Apply a single phosphorus assessment strategy, whether that be the P index or soil test P, to all fields. And in this situation, for I, as long as the NM2 compliance check report says no rotational problems found, SNAP Plus can check that box yes. Additionally, for letter J, we want to make sure that we're using complete crop rotations and the field's critical soil series to determine sheet and rill erosion estimates will not exceed tolerable soil loss. As long as we don't have any excessive soil loss messages in our rotational problems in NM2 compliance check report, SNAP Plus will also check this box yes. All right. Next, letter K. Use contours or reduce tillage, address the crop rotation, or implement other practices to prevent ephemeral erosion and maintain perennial vegetative cover to prevent reoccurring gullies. This one is usually going to be left blank. If for some reason it is checked no on your checklist, it might be because there is a documented field problem. On the Fields tab, when you click on Field Problems, you're able to come in and enter in specific issues that might be found within a field boundary. These could be gullies or ephemeral erosion. You can document them and then document the year that they are fixed. If that year is fixed, in like this example, we could say it started in 2019 and we fixed it in 2024. So when I turn in my 2025 growing season plan, this will be checked yes now because I have it documented that it was fixed in 24. Letter L, make no nutrient applications within 8 feet of irrigation wells. Again, this is going to be one that's left blank. It is up to the planner to document that we are avoiding nutrient applications within 8 feet of irrigation wells. If we are, we can check yes. If we do not have irrigation wells, we can check NA. Letter M, make no nutrient applications within 50 feet of all direct conduits to groundwater. If we have gone into SNAP maps and documented our private wells, our irrigation wells, any and all direct conduits to groundwater are mapped, and we're making sure to avoid nutrient applications within 50 feet, we can check yes. Letter N, make no untreated manure application areas within 1,000 feet of a community well or within 100 feet of a non-community well. So a non-community well could be a church or a school or a restaurant well. unless that manure is treated to substantially eliminate pathogens. Again, this one is going to be left blank. It is up to the planner to document that they do not have a community potable water well near them. Those are mapped in SNAP for us. The non-community potable water wells are not mapped, so that is our job as a planner to make sure we're documenting if there's any churches, schools, or restaurants nearby that might have a public well. And again, as long as we've mapped out those features and we're avoiding them, we can check yes. Letter O, make no nutrient or make no manure applications to areas that are locally delineated by the Land Conservation Committee or in a conservation plan as areas contributing to runoff. This most likely will be checked NA. The only time that it won't be checked NA is if you are writing a nutrient management plan in Kewaunee or Manitowoc counties. Those currently are the only two counties that have these locally delineated layers in SNAP maps. If you do have a field that intersects one of these locally delineated layers, it will be left blank. And then the planner needs to document that, yes, they're making note of these local prohibitions and they are following the rules associated with them. Letter P, make no applications of late summer or fall end fertilizer to the following areas unless they're needed to establish a fall seeded crop. So we're looking at our fall applications in our P, R, and W soils. So our permeable soils, our shallow depth bedrock soils, and our wet soils. As long as you are following and implementing the 90 or 120 pounds of available N based on what situations you're following for restrictions, your NM2 compliance check report comes back and says no compliance messages for PW and R soils, you're okay, and SNAP Plus will automatically check yes for these. Letter R, use at least one of the following practices to make nutrient applications within SWGMA's, surface water quality management areas. On this one here, as long as you are implementing one of the 5 strategies, SNAP Plus will automatically check yes. That is one thing that SNAP Plus is already looking at when you go to make your manure applications on fields that have SWGMAs. If you do not have one of these strategies in place, SNAP Plus will flag you and tell you that you do not have the correct strategies in place. But as long as you do, and if you've made a manure application, SNAP Plus will check yes. S, limit manure applications to 12,000 gallons per acre of unincorporated liquid manure or organic byproducts with 11% or less dry matter where substantial drainage is present or within a SWGMA. So again, in the NM2 compliance check report, as long as you don't have application problems or restrictions that say SWGMA in them, you are going to be checked yes for letter S. Okay, we are now moving on to the winter manure spreading section of the checklist. So letter A here is saying that we've identified manure quantities planned to be spread during the winter or the amount that is going to be generated in 14 days, whichever is greater. So in these, they're always going to be left blank, A and B. As long as you have documented that the manure produced in the winter is estimated out in your nutrient management plan, you can identify your storage systems. If your storage systems note that they can account for the amount of manure that's going to be produced, you can come in and identify and check yes. It's also going to make sure that you have a good idea of which, of which fields are going to be good candidates for winter spreading. We'll get into that here on this next page. So in the winter, I should explain what is winter. Winter is when frozen or snow-covered soils prevent effective incorporation of manure. So it isn't necessarily December 1st through February 28th. I should say winter is purely determined by whether the ground is frozen or snow-covered and not allowing for effective incorporation. So in the winter, we want to make sure that we're not applying any manure within SWGMAs. As long as our field boundaries are in SNAP maps, these will be checked yes for us. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we have a SWGMA, and in the winter that turns into a red and black slashed area for a no spread zone. Letter D, show on a map and make sure that surface applications of liquid manure during February and March where Silurian dolomite is within 60 inches of the surface, or where you have DNR well compensation areas. We're making sure that we're not applying during February and March within those areas. If there is an area that you have DNR well compensation or less than 5 feet to Silurian, there will be a guidance message in here reminding you that liquid manure applications during February and March are not allowed. Show on the map and make no applications of manure within 300 feet of direct conduits to groundwater. So in the non-winter months, our direct conduits to groundwater previously had a 50-foot buffer. In the winter months, those direct conduits to groundwater increased the buffer from 50 feet to 300 feet. SNAP Plus is also able to help us identify the total acres that are going to be manure spreadable in the non-winter seasons, as well as the manure spreadable acres in the winter seasons. So in this example over here on the left-hand side, this field is 6.3 acres. 6.3 acres are allowed to be spread with manure, but in the winter, only 1.5 acres are allowed to be spread. So to document that in my nutrient management plan, I would do a dairy liquid application in the winter. In the winter, I would only be applying on that south portion in that 1.5 acres. If I did a dairy liquid application then in the spring, I would identify it as my winter manure prohibited area. And that winter manure prohibited area is that 4.8 acres that is in the red. And that is how I can kind of distinguish that I applied in this available area in the winter. And then I applied in this red zone in the spring when my manure prohibition is gone. So that's a neat feature that SNAP Plus helps us out with, is accounting for our winter spreadable acres and versus our non-winter spreadable acres. Additionally, in the winter, we need to make sure that our pea removal is, or that we're not exceeding the pea removal of the following growing season's crop when we're applying manure. Also, our liquid manure applications are limited to 7,000 gallons per acre. As long as we don't have any compliance issues for winter P205 application rates in the NM2 compliance check report, SNAP Plus will automatically check this one yes for us. Letter G, make no applications of manure to fields that have concentrated flow channels. You're going to look at implementing one of the 7 strategies that are listed in this chart here. Additionally, we have a rule that says make no applications to slopes that are greater than 6%. So depending on if you have a concentrated flow channel present in your field, or if you had slopes greater than 6%, you're going to have to pick 2 of these winter strategies that are listed in this table here. To find and identify your winter practices, on the nutrient application planner, you're going to click on winter practices, and you can set the winter practices for each individual field here by clicking on winter practices and then selecting A, B, C, D, or E. Additionally, if you click on tools, you're able to, in the upper left corner, you can set your farm-wide winter spreading practices, meaning you can choose 2 winter spreading practices to use across the entirety of your farm. If those 2 winter spreading strategies don't work for the entirety of your farm, you can go field by field and select your winter spreading practices. Last but definitely not least is the signature portion. So we have the line here at the top for qualified nutrient management planner signature, and then also the signature of the farmer that they are receiving it and understanding the plan. Both of these signatures are allowed to be electronic signatures. They can also be hand-drawn signatures, but people have asked in the past if electronic signatures are allowed, and yes, they are. That wraps up this portion of our webinar. If you have any questions related to nutrient management planning, SNAP Plus, or compliance requirements within your nutrient management plan, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email is below, as well as my phone number, and I would love to be able to help you out if I can. Thank you so much for participating today, and we will chat again soon. Bye bye.